What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with our prop preview for round one of the Arnold Palmer Invitational. Going to go through the golf course, Bay Hill Club and Lodge. Make sure you're familiar with what to expect this week, both from scoring, birdies, bogeys or worse, all of those sort of metrics. And then at the end, going to go through both the prize picks and the underdog fantasy board and give you two props on each site that I'll be targeting for my slips. So let's start it, hop right into it with the golf course, which is an absolute bear. If you haven't seen the API before, you're going to see some nasty conditions, particularly when the winds kick up. But luckily for these players, just foreshadowing a bit here, the wind, not going to be a massive factor. So when we take a look at some of the scoring here, just know that it's extremely dependent on those weather conditions. And last year, with some nasty conditions there Saturday and Sunday for rounds 3 and 4, the scoring average played nearly 2 shots over. In fact, 1.89 shots over par, which is a little bit higher than what you're used to seeing. I mean, the average score here is a little bit closer to 1.5 shots over par typically, but that's what happens when the winds kick up. And like I mentioned, because weather is such an important factor, let's go ahead and take a look at that right away. In the morning there on Thursday, they're calling for next to no wind. Anytime you have less than 5 miles an hour of winds down here in Florida, that's about as ideal as it's going to get. And then in the afternoon, it kicks up a little bit, even towards midday. You have closer to 15-mile-an-hour wind gusts, but that is nothing atypical. And if anything, this is just a breezy little afternoon in Florida. So in terms of your scoring averages, I expect to see closer to that 1.5 over par average, maybe even closer to just a 1 stroke over par average because of how strong the field is now. Instead of just having 3-4 of those top 10, top 20 players, now all of the top 20, all of the top 50 players on the PGA Tour are going to be teeing it up. So you will see just guys play better because they're some of the better players on tour, but the weather conditions, the low winds, especially there for the morning wave, is going to be another helpful factor. A few other things to go through. The driving accuracy and the green and regulation percentages are slightly lower than what we're used to seeing. In terms of your driving accuracy, it's only 1% lower than most weeks. So out of the 14 fairways on property, players are usually going to hit just over 9 per round. And then when you take a look at greens and regulation, they are hit at a 60.1% clip, or at least were last year, which equates to just under 11 greens hit per round. So with better wind conditions for round one, with receptive greens, they're going to be as soft as they will be all week here on Thursday. I would expect percentages to maybe sway a little bit closer to like 9.5 fairways, perhaps closer to 11 or even an 11.5 greens in regulation, considering how strong the field is. So with all of that in mind, they don't have any fairway or green props up on Prize Picks yet, which is a little bit disappointing, but wanted to throw all that info out there just in case they do post them at any point. But let's take a look at a few of these matchups, which you guys know, if you've been around here for a while, if you've been following my channel, I'm not huge on the whole matchup board, but with a few of the matchups we have here for Thursday, I just couldn't resist. So first off, we got Jon Rahm going against Shane Lowry. And Jon Rahm, though he wasn't as elite a birdie maker as he was this year, there in 2022, last year was number 17 on tour when it comes to birdie percentage. This year, he's number 1 by a wide margin. So we know he's one of those elite tier guys that can fill it up in a hurry. Matched up against Shane Lowry, who's no one to scoff at, right? Definitely a respectable PGA Tour player, a major winner at that, but somebody who was 91 on the PGA Tour last year when it comes to birdie percentage, and this year isn't all that much better. Outside of the top 10 performance at the Honda last week, really hasn't done much, and you're talking about Jon Rahm, who's coming in winning 3 of his last 5 global starts. So this is a no-brainer over. Again, I'm not usually a huge proponent of taking birdie matchups because they are so prone to volatility, but when you have a talent gap difference and a birdie percentage difference between two players as large as what we have here, it's something that I'm looking to exploit. And it seems like that's a recurring theme because, in fact, most of the props, if not all of the ones I'm taking over here in Prize Picks for round one, are on the birdie or better matchup board, because another example of another guy I'm willing to get to, and there's actually numerous here on the birdie board that I'm getting to, the rest of which, of course, are posted on the Patreon. We'll talk about that here in a second. But Rory McIlroy versus Tyrrell Hatton is one I want to touch on here for this video. Tyrrell Hatton, another player that's respectable on tour, right? A little bit of a popper. Inconsistent is a good way to put it. But when he has his best game, he's more than capable of getting into contention. And around Bay Hill, he's made a habit of doing so. Has a win here, a couple other top 3 finishes, showing that he has a penchant for bringing that game here here, but against Rory McIlroy, who's also a defending champion and arguably the best player in the world. And in terms of birdie or better percentage, was top 5 on tour last year and is, of course, top 5 in that category once again. So you're talking about one of the elite players in the world, also from the birdie percentage, one of, if not the best birdie maker we have against somebody with elite course history. And while we have to give Haddon a little bit of credit for the course history, it's nowhere near enough to make up for that talent gap and that birdie percentage difference. So much like Shane Lowry, Tyrrell Hatton ranks well outside the top 50 on tour in birdie percentage, or at least did last year, and does once again here in 2023. So a relatively straightforward play, and you could say the same thing about 2, 3, even 4 other matchups here on the board. So we're not going to touch on them here. I have to say again, I do post all of the props I'm taking over here on the Patreon page, but I want to give you an idea of how you can attack the board and whatnot. On there, I post my write-up. You can see on here, this is part of it. You can see down there at the bottom right, there's the Jon Rahm matchup, the little write-up for it. But I do that for all the props that I'm taking. I post the averages. I go over the weather, in-depth analysis over multiple sources and whatnot. So check that out if you're looking for all the props I'm taking. But just to give you an idea, I think that strokes or birdies or better are a little bit more fair. There are a few props that I'm leaning on taking right now. I'm kind of waiting until we have a little bit more selection. And speaking of, we actually got a little bit more selection here on the board. Before they only posted, I believe, 10 players. They ended up posting the bottom half of the board. So now we have guys posted towards 72 strokes. Definitely a few guys I'll probably end up adding onto that write-up a little bit later on. But for the purposes of this video, the scoring average, right, was over a 73. And though we have relatively benign conditions expected for round 1, the bottom end of the board is where you're going to find a few fades, right? Guys that are maybe not coming in with the best of form. I mean, there's one guy that really sticks out here as just a clear fade at 72 strokes. But even at 71.5, right, guys that are in a little bit more sketchy form are guys that I'm probably going to look to fade, even with the weather conditions, because like I said, the scoring average is probably still going to be at least a stroke over par, which is a 73. And though a lot of the guys, it's not all of them on here. Again, there was one at 72 that was just a clear fade. I think I'm going to get to there. Even some of these just borderline middle tier, even just all-star, like the better than average players are still going to project for the over. In terms of your birdies or better, your average, let's go over here and look, it was 3.277 birdies per round. It's worth noting the bogeys or worse ratio was 3.484 bogeys or worse, for anybody wondering. So this board, right, projected a little bit high, but towards the bottom, right, they just added a lot of these props. I think the guys at 3.5 are a little bit more fair. Sahith Theegala, right, at 3 sticks out immediately, but even some of these slightly better than average players, right, like a Jordan Spieth down there, Hideki Matsuyama, for example, are guys I'd be leaning on for the over. So there's certainly actually going to be props I'm adding on to the Patreon page here shortly, but that should give you an idea of how to attack it. Up top, these guys at 4, it's going to be a tough scene to get to 5. So, these elite guys like a Rory, Scotty, wouldn't be taking the under on it, but it's just a tough scene to get to the over. Jon Rahm's the only guy at 4.5. I think that's an appropriate line. I'm probably not touching that. Again, I prefer the matchup board over here. All of these props were posted before, but all the guys at 4, if they were at 3.5, I'd probably be smashing their overs. But at 4, I have a really hard time doing so. Getting to 5 birdies was a feat that was reserved for the top 5, 7 percentile performances last year. And even though these are the elite players, right? Much more likely than your average player here to go out there and get to that ceiling. From a 50-50 prop perspective, it's hard to put your money behind that, right? A 5 to 7th percentile kind of performance. And though they bring a ton of push equity, right? Like most of these guys, I would say 75% of them are going to end up actually just getting to 4 and pushing there. That's not what you want, right? So if you're going to do anything, I guess take their strokes, hope that they can go out there, have a relatively clean round. But I think the value to be had, these matchups where there's a huge talent gap there, and then with some of the fades here at the bottom of strokes. I think there's a few guys there I like. And then if you're going to take any supportive stances for the lower tier guys, I would definitely take their birdie or betters over their strokes, because this is a course where you're averaging 3.484 bogeys or worse per round, which means these lower tier guys, right, might be making 4 bogeys in a round, but if they can go out there, get you to 3 like a Sahith, right, you can hit that over there. I'm just going to officially add that one on there. And the strokes prop I was going over, I'm not even going to tease it, right, I'll just give it to you. It's the Adam Hadwin over on strokes. Like, these are all props I'd be considering, but again, if you're going to take these lower tier players, it'd be over on strokes because of the mistakes that everyone's going to be prone to. And then over on birdies on the more aggressive players. And the reason why I chose Sahith here, right? The reason why I was drawn to him is because he's not an elite tier birdie maker, but he was like number 50 on tour last year, right? Which is better than Kirk. It's better than guys like Rose, certainly better than guys like Ricky and Keegan Bradley on tour, and on par with guys like a Jason Day, a Tom Kim, even like a Jordan Spieth, that kind of thing. So, and better than a Matt Fitzpatrick, believe it or not. So that's why I'm trying to target those sort of players towards the bottom of that board. But yeah, definitely new things to come there on the Patreon. Speaking of, if you want to join, it is $10 a month. There is a link in the description of the video. Again, gets you access to all of that. Shameless plug aside now. Let's go ahead and get into these underdog props. So over here on the underdog side, I want to point your attention to these two. And they've had the whole board up the entire time, so probably nothing going to get added there. But I do like the Shane Lowry under for bogeys or worse. The average, again, was 3.484, and that included 2 rounds of nasty conditions last year. Shane Lowry is top 20 on the PGA Tour when it comes to bogey avoidance. So he's a player kind of like a Sungjae Im, John Rahm, even Scotty Scheffler, right? That's exceptional at going out there and keeping a clean scorecard. So when the field average is going to be right about where this prop is, and you have an elite tier player in that category, something that you'd want to exploit. So yeah, definitely taking the under. Then I'm taking the over on Sam Burns' strokes. Sorry, not strokes. Incorrect there. Over on his birdies or better. He's one of the top 20 players on tour when it comes to birdie or better percentage. He's going off in the morning wave, which is when winds are going to be their lowest, right? Like we were looking at before, sub 5 mile-an-hour winds for the first 4 or 5 hours of play, which is going to be a huge advantage, particularly for somebody that loves Bermuda grass like Burns. We call him Bermuda Burnsy for a reason, and that can throw absolute darts out there. So I do think that he's going to be prone to making mistakes. He could get himself into a little bit of trouble off the tee, make a few bogeys, double bogeys there from time to time. But when we're taking a birdie or better prop, we don't have to worry about that negative end of the volatility. All we care about is the aggressiveness going out there, the willingness to score. He's got the putting numbers on the surface we're looking for, the high birdie percentage that we're looking for, and another prop that I'm taking. But over here in underdog, at least as of right now, I have more money in on my underdog side, and I also have more props over there. I believe I had 9 props as of last count. I was considering adding some of the par 3 strokes, depending on how they look there in person tomorrow. I remind you too, I'm going to the Pro-Am, so I'm going to get to see a lot of these holes in person, see how firm the greens are, so on and so forth. And after I do so, might be able to adjust the modeling a little bit and perhaps add a few props into action as well. So keep an eye out for all of that, but also all of the underdog props that I'm taking are posted on the Patreon as well. But that's all I've got, guys. Hopefully you feel a little bit more prepared for going out there, making your own slips, betting some golf this weekend with an elite tier field. I'm really looking forward to it. If you're going out there, go ahead and say hi. I'll be there all 4 days. Always willing to buy another mate of beer, chill out, watch a little bit of golf. So feel free to come on and say hi. And best of luck with all of those slips. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out of here. Comment down below what your top prop either on PrizePicks or on Underdog is. And make sure you subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the content in the future. Best of luck, like I said, and let's get this cash.